Hello, everyone. I want to thank everybody for being here and all of the great support from the state and the leadership here from the port all the way on up has been pretty incredible. It's great to see this type of event and a lot of the topics and conversations that have been happening. It's just it's amazing to be part of this because these are the kind of things that we love to try to educate our policyholders about, and they're all very important subjects, and it's just great to see so much content discussed in such a short period of time. So with that, we can start kicking off the first slide here. Or maybe I can. There we go. So yeah, we're going to talk about cyber insurance, a nice exciting topic. I'm sure we'll get into some data that will be exciting, I promise. And really what it's about is the different claims trends that we see, so the different types of incidents that we see happening, and what the underwriting response is. So what are the responses from insurance carriers, how does that translate to the market, and what things should we be looking out for specifically to help avoid those types of incidents. All right, so this is a slide that kind of just discusses some of the claims frequency by industry. And over the last couple quarters of periods where we can see some different trends emerge across different industry segments. So this is data strictly coming from Coalition's claims data set, and I'm happy to make the full report available to everybody here so that you can really dig into the details in the report. But this is very recent data. You can see that we even have some reporting data here from this year, for the first half of the year. So this is kind of like very indicative of what the trends are and kind of what the targeting methodologies of the adversaries are. And so we can see here, among consumer staples, industrials, materials, these are great targets for adversaries. There's been a lot of focus and pressure on these things via supply chain, manufacturing issues. I mean, like these are highly sought after targets because of the intensity around the kind of pressure on recovery. The easiest way to cover from a ransomware attack is usually to pay the ransom. It's the fastest way to get the keys. It's also the one that we don't like to do. We don't like to pay ransoms. We try to avoid that at all costs. But in a lot of cases, sometimes the dollars and cents are you versus, cost of recovery, to recover from backups versus decryption. That cost benefit analysis when there's a lot of time and pressure on the line is an important one to consider. So this is a good way to kind of start this conversation. So we can see this, this slide is kind of showing us a little bit more data about Coalition's own claims experience and some of the technologies and techniques that we've introduced to kind of try to mitigate ransomware specifically. From starting in the beginning of 2020 to now in 2021, we've actually been able to take a pretty good chunk out of the ransomware risk, and we'll talk about some of the methods that we were able to do that. We do that via underwriting, so we do security analysis and scans. We collect data from external network scans and also threat intelligence sources that kind of inform us what the adversary's targeting methodologies are. And we kind of overlap those two. We use the adversary's targeting methodology to inform us what to look for, and then we go look for it in the scans. And where that data kind of lines up, we focus on those issues, and often we're able to get policyholders or potential policyholders to actually remediate certain issues. So like if they have RDP exposed to the internet, we'll tell them, hey, that's the number1 targeted technology in the world right now, don't do that. If we see, VMware server exposed to the internet, being used as a air gap for, SCADA devices and other systems, we'll say that's probably not a good idea. We see that being targeted very successfully. And so we do this kind of over and over again. We have about 15 security analysts. Actually, about half of them are here in Florida, ironically. Companies based in San Francisco, all the cyber talent, by the bulk actually resides here in Florida, including me. That's kind of just an interesting anecdote there. So getting into a little bit more detail on the specific ransomware cases that we see, and again, this is just from Coalition's own policyholder data and our own claims experience. These are all the different ransomware incidents and the volume, the average ransom demand. So we can see that the ransom demand's kind of fluctuated. There's some new players that have kind of entered the field here, making some very sizable demands. By and large, Coalition's own experience, when we're filtering kind of on the front side for all those technologies and things that we see that might lead to claims, these are the ones that get by us. And so we pay particular attention to these to figure out how we can use that process to better inform our own analytic assumptions when we're doing security scans and underwriting. Again, this is kind of just re-highlighting some of those industries and keying in on specifically the ones that we see. This is from 2021, the beginning of 2021, the industries that were most targeted by ransomware attacks. the ones that we just discussed, consumer discretionary industrials. And this has been a trend since like kind of COVID started. The adversaries saw the intensity and the pressure on these particular market segments, and they realized that's an opportunity. There's already kind of, enough pressure on the system that any real disruption can really, create like an exponential or compounding problem in the situation. And so that's the kind of advantage they're looking to seize up on there. So, ransomware is not the only issue, that we're facing. There's also, things like business email compromise, as was, kind of discussed earlier, the wire transfer fraud scenario. We see our fair share of those. But broadly speaking, there's two big trends, and those are ransomware and business email compromise. And I guess if there was a subcategory under business email compromise, it would be the fraudulent funds transfer. In many cases, the business email compromise is a precursor to the fraudulent funds transfer. So we can kind of look at that a little bit more specifically here too. So, what is a funds transfer fraud event? I think everybody knows what ransomware is. We've definitely seen it in the media. What goes kind of unnoticed a lot is the amount of funds transfer fraud that's happening. For us, since we've had a pretty good, campaign against ransomware, this is now our largest claims experience, and this year so far is actually not ransomware. It's related to business email compromise and funds fraud. And so this is kind of a process, and we don't have to go through each one of these steps here, but this is a process, this is kind of the methodologies that the adversaries follow. So just like ransomware has a targeting methodology where they're scanning for RDP, they're looking for VMware, they're looking for open or unsecured or default passwords. The funds transfer fraud stuff has a similar kind of attack methodology and a targeting cycle where, those adversaries are going to go out there, they're going to identify, companies or businesses or entities that lack specific email security protections, like Sender Policy Framework or, some of the other things that, for the people that know what I'm talking about. But they target these companies based on specific facts that exist. These are the same facts that we use at Coalition to judge like complexity and security for an organization, resiliency against these types of attacks. But this is the whole process here. There's a point in time where the targeting turns into a business email compromise when the adversary actually gains email to an inbox. And usually that goes through some searching, some email rules, and then lo and behold, an invoice gets altered and some funds go where they shouldn't. But yeah, this is pretty much the one that we're after right now, having gotten ahead of the ransomware a little bit here. And this is a breakdown, again, you'll see some kind of the repeats on the targeting trends for ransomware. It kind of follow the same broad categories also in business email compromise. So we see that, the adversaries, while they're looking at, ransomware opportunities and they're looking at fraudulent funds transfer opportunities, there's a lot of overlap in the targeting methodology here. The same industries and segments are affected kind of almost in the same order as frequency. So we can see that it's not just ransomware groups specifically, or it's, these are usually distinct groups that do these kind of activities, whether it's ransomware or it's wire fraud. These groups' methodologies kind of overlap, and a lot of that is probably around the opportunity given the market conditions. So, when we see these kind of trends and we understand that these different methodologies and attack scenarios are what the adversaries are out there doing, on the cyber insurance side, we try to identify these and come up with mitigations. What can we change about our process, our approach? The things that will make like contingent or say, hey, you have to close this or fix this before we can offer insurance. Of all those things, the number one most impactful thing any business can do, and I hope, everybody takes note of that, is multi-factor authentication on email. I can't stress this enough. This control is unbelievably effective, and if anybody takes away any one thing out of this whole thing, please go implement MFA and tell your friends. Because it's really out of all the claims that we pay on email, wire transfer fraud and business email compromise, we have paid zero this year when MFA has been deployed. I would say that we haven't had any, but we have had one because somebody saw the little, green checkbox come up and they just hit yes, even though they weren't trying to log in. Don't ask me how that happens. It happened. So, but long story short is that MFA is incredibly powerful control against these types of things. So we should all be doing this. The next one is endpoint detection and response systems. Oops. So EDR systems are a great technology to have. This is kind of above and beyond antivirus. This is looking more at the behavioral elements of the, how ransomware attackers operate or how malicious actors operate. Getting into those behavioral elements and outside just the signatures that are limited in antivirus is imperative. So we recommend this control a lot as well. Secure offline isolated backups. I think this is a reoccurring theme as well here today. It's really important that when you're developing a backup strategy, backup strategy today isn't what it was 5 years ago or 10 years ago. Backup strategy, even 5 years ago was more about if the building burns down, do we get our data back? It's not so much about that today as it is if somebody gets inside our network and actively targets our backups, do we still have any data left? And believe it or not, the best recovery we've had for types of technology is actually tapes. We recover more companies off tapes than we do other solutions now, and it's because of that. It's because there's a physical separation. And it's not by design, it's just because they happen to use tapes and there's a big stack of them there, so they still have data. Whereas some of the companies that have moved on to more modern or cloud-based technologies where they have it all in one place, when we go to look there, it's encrypted, so it's gone. So it's just kind of one of those things to think about. It's a different kind of attack scenario and a different type of business risk. And again, external network exposures, I can't underscore this enough. I always say RDP is actually ransomware delivery protocol because it's more useful for that than it is for the intended purpose. We see it so much. It started with Bluekeep, and it was a theme that the attackers seized on, and they just keep going back to the well because it just keeps giving. And then of course, what do we do, in response to that as a cyber insurance company when we see these types of risk? Obviously we're rating on size, loss history, attack surface, industry, record counts, all those kind of things. But if anything, we look at the technical signals. How mature is the organization? Are they going to withstand, or are they going to show up in somebody's targeting set, when they go out there to do hunts and look for new victims? What's the frequency that they're going to occur, and in what scenarios do they fit? So of course we have things like ransomware supplemental questionnaires. We don't need to dig into the details on these things. But these are some of the things that are more common in the cyber insurance industry now. Is you're going to see more and more supplemental applications, and companies are going to want more and more information. At Coalition, we try to underwrite as much as we possibly can from external network scans and trying to do more a signals intelligence-based approach to kind of make it more of a more fluid experience for the policyholders and easier for the brokers. And then we also want to use that data and provide it to our policyholders so they can actually see what we see on the underwriting side, because why wouldn't we share all that information? And on that note, we do offer free automated external scans via Coalition Control. So the same process that we use and the exact same technologies that we use for our own underwriting purpose, the one that's been helping us get from a claims, industry claims frequency average of around 7%. This year so far, Coalition's at about 2.1%. So over the market, we're beating the market pretty well on those fronts. And a lot of it comes just from simple stuff like just understanding what the attack surface looks like from the adversary's perspective. Internally, we always say that we underwrite like an adversary. We're looking at each business just as the attackers would through all these different scenarios, and we decide if we want to insure them and for how much, kind of based on those factors. I'm here today because of NAM and a partnership with AHT and George Forrester over there. It's just incredible how much private industry is able to respond to these things and the solutions that have come out of it. I was actually building a cybersecurity product before I came to work for Coalition because I saw it I just saw how it worked and how well it was able to be an effective cybersecurity product for industry. It's not every small business out there can afford a $50,000 firewall, but they might be able to afford the insurance premium that'll actually help them stand back up if they experience a cyber incident. And I think that this, the reason I'm here today through these partnerships is a key part of that, and hopefully will enable more future success.